Welcome, friend. I'm Jack, host of the channel, and today we're diving into another episode. Pour yourself a drink and get comfortable, because I've got a powerful story coming your way. If something hits deep, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it.
I always believed that marrying Megan would lead to a simple, happy life. Our relationship flowed smoothly, like a calm river with few arguments and a comfortable routine. But there was always a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I usually dismissed it as stress or just my imagination. Over time, subtle changes in Megan's behavior started to stand out. These small shifts, though barely noticeable at first, began to add up, and I could no longer ignore them. Looking back, the signs had always been there, but I hadn't realized it until strange things started happening around our third anniversary. The first clue came when Megan decided to change her hairstyle. She had never cut her hair before, and I loved it long. So when she returned from a post-Thanksgiving shopping trip with her sisters sporting a new short haircut, it caught me completely off guard. It looked amazing, so much so that I was speechless. My reaction seemed to unsettle her. "Who are you, and what did you do with my wife?" I joked, thinking she'd take it as a compliment. Instead, she looked scared and almost guilty, as if ready to run. Quickly, she explained, "My sisters Melissa and Margot convinced me to cut it. I hope you're not upset." Though I was surprised, I reassured her, "You look beautiful. I love it." Relieved, she asked again, "Are you sure you're not mad?" "Not at all," I replied. "You look incredible." She smiled, but it was a weak, nervous smile, unlike her usual one. At the time, I was too focused on admiring her new look to notice anything wrong, but looking back, I remember it clearly. Her initial reaction and guilty expression stayed with me, but I brushed it off as nerves about the sudden change, thinking maybe she was just worried I wouldn't like it. Later that evening, I discovered she hadn't just changed the hair on her head. She'd altered her intimate hairstyle as well. Not seeing any razor marks, I asked, "Did you shave?" "No," she replied. "I had electrolysis. It's permanent." "Isn't that a bit extreme?" "What if you change your mind?" "I won't. I think it looks sexy now, don't you?" "It's your body, and you're definitely sexy. I just think shaving might have been a good idea before going all the way." "Don't you like it?" she asked, sounding a little uncertain. "I do," I replied. "I'm just surprised." That night, we had incredible sex, starting in the bedroom and ending in the living room. Megan seemed more interested in her new look than she let on. The next few days felt awkward. She acted like a stranger sometimes, and I realized the hairstyle might have meant more to her than I initially thought. By Monday, things were back to normal, and after days of complimenting her hair, she finally admitted she was glad I truly liked it. The following weekend, Megan's sisters came over for a barbecue. That's when I learned more about identical triplets than I ever expected. Margot and Melissa showed up with the exact same hairstyle as Megan. Just a week earlier, their hair had been as long as Megan's had been before the transformation. Now, they all looked identical again. Without their different outfits, I couldn't tell them apart. Over time, I noticed that each sister had her own personality, but it was still difficult to distinguish them. Megan's shorter hair had been my one clear advantage, but now I was back to being teased by their uncanny similarities. There were a few subtle ways to tell them apart, though. Megan and Melissa were studious and calm, while Margot was the wild one, often leading them into mischief. She was more carefree, always the first to buy something sexy and convince the others to wear it. Melissa, the smartest, had earned her MBA, while Megan and Margot only had bachelor's degrees. Melissa had been married 2 years before I even met Megan, while Margot, still single, made it clear marriage wasn't for her. She loved her independence and didn't intend to settle down anytime soon. Megan, Melissa, and Margot had always been close, especially when their parents had issues. They often dressed alike, making it impossible to tell them apart, which sometimes led to shared punishments as kids. Even shopping could be difficult since they all wore the same size and had similar tastes, and stores rarely had 3 identical items in stock. During that barbecue, I noticed something strange. Rick, Melissa's husband, didn't show up, and the sisters seemed worried. Though no one talked about it, I could tell Melissa and Rick were having problems. Rick and I never got along well. He was always distant and cold towards me, which left me puzzled. While we were eating, Megan went inside to get some ketchup, and Melissa followed. They were gone for half an hour, clearly having a private conversation. Meanwhile, Margot started flirting with me, even going so far as to touch me inappropriately. I played along lightly but made sure not to let things go too far. Margot's flirting wasn't new. She had always been like that, even when I was just dating Megan. But I knew better than to act on it. When Melissa returned, she sat at the far end of the table, giving me strange looks. I thought she might have been uncomfortable with Margot's behavior, so I quickly backed off. After lunch, Megan seemed worried, sensing the tension between Melissa and Rick. I reassured her that I was there for her and her sisters. That night, Megan was distant in bed, but after a while, she clung to me tightly. It was clear how serious Melissa's situation was. The next week passed calmly, and by Saturday, things had returned to normal. Megan was eager to go Christmas shopping with her sisters, so I wasn't surprised when Margot picked her up for a day out. I spent the day working around the house, taking advantage of the warm weather to refinish the front deck and tidy up the yard. Later in the afternoon, I went shopping at the mall and spotted Margot's car in the parking lot. Hoping to avoid them, I quickly left and went to another shopping center to finish my shopping. I felt clever for dodging them and wrapped the gifts before heading home, where I found them all in the kitchen having coffee. "Oh, someone went shopping without us," Megan teased, reaching for the gifts. "What did you bring us?" "It's a surprise," I replied. "You'll find out on Christmas morning." "Come on, Matt. Tell me it's for Margot and Melissa, right?" "Nope," I said. "I know you three too well. If I tell you, you'll figure it out through your telepathy, and I'm not spoiling the surprise this year." "Telepathy, really?" Megan laughed. "Yes, you girls are telepathic. If I tell you, you'll somehow tell them, and I'll be a terrible gift giver again. Not happening." Megan smiled, but it was a fleeting one. There was a seriousness to it I hadn't seen before, and it left me uneasy. Later that night, as we got into bed, I asked her, "So do you think I'm pestering you for sex too much?" She looked confused. "No, Matt, why would you think that?" "Because of what you said earlier, about Margot and Melissa borrowing me." "I was just teasing," she said. "Don't take it so seriously." "You've never joked like that before," I replied. "I thought you liked how often we have sex. If I'm pushing too much, just tell me. I don't want you to feel obligated." "Matt, I love having sex with you. If anything, I wish we did it more often, but life gets in the way sometimes," she said, frustration mixed with concern. "I was just teasing. Don't read too much into it." "Sometimes teasing can hide how people really feel," I said. "It sounded like you might be tired of it." "Please, Matt, our sex life is great. What's really bothering you?" I sighed. "I think something's going on with Melissa and Rick, and you're all keeping it from me. I don't like secrets, especially if they affect our marriage." "Honey, it's just girl talk. Melissa and Rick are having some issues, but we think they'll work it out. Melissa's never been open about her feelings. If it were Margot or me, you'd know everything. Melissa's just shy and doesn't want you and Rick to fight over it." She hugged me, and though I accepted her explanation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. Her comment about Melissa not wanting Rick and me to fight left me puzzled, given that Rick and I were never close. A week passed, and the incident faded from my mind. But then something happened that opened my eyes. It was a Thursday night. Megan cut her finger while helping me prepare dinner. It was a small cut, and we quickly cleaned it up and put a bandage on it. The next morning, I saw a scab forming on her finger. She put on another bandage before heading to work. Friday was hectic for me, and by evening, Megan's sisters came over for a game night. We laughed and had fun, but I noticed something strange. All three sisters had bandages on the same finger in the exact same spot. I joked about it being a triplet thing, but they exchanged odd looks and I dropped the subject, realizing it wasn't something they wanted to talk about. That night, as Megan got ready for bed, I noticed her bandage was gone, and the cut on her finger had completely disappeared. When she caught me looking, she quickly reapplied the bandage without saying anything. Concerned, I brushed it off, thinking maybe I had just been mistaken about which finger she had cut. The next few days passed, but something didn't sit right with me. I started paying closer attention, and one evening, I noticed that the cut on Megan's finger had reappeared, but at a different angle. It was unsettling. I didn't say anything, but I knew something was very wrong. Over the next week, I decided to test my suspicions. I discreetly marked Megan with a small dot using a permanent marker between her shoulder blades, hidden by her bra strap. The mark lasted through showers and stayed for a few days. By Saturday, it disappeared, and Megan began acting strangely again. I repeated the process, switching to different colored markers, green, red, black. Each time, the mark would stay for a while, then vanish. That's when I realized something shocking. The woman in bed with me wasn't always Megan. The sisters were rotating, and I had been unknowingly with all three of them. I was confused. Was this some sort of twisted game they were playing? I never imagined being in such a situation, and I wasn't sure how to feel. Melissa and Rick's divorce was now underway, but Megan avoided talking about it. I knew I had to confront her, but how could I be sure which sister I was even speaking to? Unsure of how to proceed, I let things continue until New Year's. Then I decided I'd had enough. One Thursday night, as Megan and I were getting ready for bed, she noticed something was off. "Why aren't you undressed?" she asked, puzzled. "I was just wondering who you are tonight," I said calmly. She froze, looking shocked. "What do you mean?" "I'm wondering which one you are, Melissa, Margot, or my wife Megan. I'd really like to know who I'm sharing this bed with." She tried to brush it off. "You won't get anything if you keep this up. I don't know where you got this idea about me sharing you with my sisters, but—" "Megan," I interrupted, "what's wrong with you?" "Turn around," I said, my voice firm. "What?" she asked, confused. "Turn around," I repeated. Reluctantly she did, and there they were, small black marks on her back. "Interesting," I said. "Last week the marks were red, and now they're black. I bet by tomorrow or Saturday they'll be green." She looked confused, and then understanding dawned on her face. "You talked to Rick, didn't you?" "No, Rick hasn't spoken to me. I figured this out on my own, and I don't like what I've discovered. This could mean the end of us, if there ever really was an us." "How do you know?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It started with the haircuts. You used a credit card to get a haircut on the Friday after Thanksgiving, but when I looked into it, I found out Megan got her haircut on Tuesday. Margot got hers on Tuesday too, and Melissa on Thursday." I watched her reaction, and I could see that she knew I was onto something. "You all used the same hairdresser," I continued, "so I spoke to her. She confirmed Megan's credit card was used on Thursday, but I know I wasn't with my actual wife that week." She tried to defend herself. "I paid for Melissa's haircut, so what?" "Then there was the finger cut. Megan cut her finger and I bandaged it, but the next time all three of you had bandages, and the one who got into bed with me had no cut under hers. Later, the cut even changed angles. That's impossible." I pressed on, and the colored marks, after noticing those, I started marking who I was with. Black, green, and red. You're black. Red was last week. Green should have been next. "Matt, I love you," she pleaded. "I can't explain this alone. We all need to sit down and talk. Please." "I wish I could believe that," I said, feeling numb. "But right now I don't even know who you are." "I'm Megan," she insisted. "Oh, that makes me feel so much better. How will you prove it?" I asked, challenging her. Her face fell, defeated. "I really can't prove anything right now." For the first time I realized the woman standing in front of me might not be the one I had married. And that hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. Her face was full of worry, realizing she couldn't prove who she was. The woman I thought I married might not even be standing in front of me, and that realization hit me hard. Melissa's been married to Rick all these years. Margot's been single and dating different men. So tell me, was Margot ever going to settle down? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. "Of course not," she admitted, but quickly added, "It's not what you think. Margot didn't sleep with all those men. You need to understand." "I need to understand that the woman I married isn't who I thought she was," I interrupted. "I don't even know her, or how to tell her apart from her sisters. You three lied, cheated, and stole from me." "It's not like that, Matt. You weren't denied anything," she pleaded. "Yes, I was. I was denied the love of the woman I thought I married," I said, my anger rising. "How long has this been going on?" "Since high school," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. I was shocked. "You mean you've been doing this to people since then?" "We love you, Matt," she said, her voice breaking. "All of us. Rick knew about it before you came into the picture, but things got complicated when you didn't know." "Rick knew the whole time?" I asked, stunned. "Yes, but now we need to talk with my sisters. We have to sort this out together," she said, desperation in her voice. I stared at her, trying to keep my anger in check. "It's probably too late for that. I don't even know who I'm talking to anymore." "Honey, I'm Megan, really," she insisted, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm afraid we've lost you," she muttered, almost to herself. "Oh my God, this wasn't how it was supposed to be. Damn Rick for leaving. This mess is all because of him." "I deserve some respect, Megan," I said, frustrated. "I figured this out on my own. Rick had nothing to do with it." "Really?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, the haircuts, the cut finger, and the markers, those confirmed my worst fears." Later, with all three sisters sitting across from me in the kitchen, I felt overwhelmed. I had slept with all three of them, yet I couldn't tell them apart. I broke the silence. "How long, and why did you do this?" They started talking all at once, until the sister in the middle stopped them and answered, "Matt, we never meant to hurt you. We've been doing this our whole lives." "Your whole lives?" I asked, confused. "Yes, since childhood. We did everything together, played, got in trouble, discovered puberty, even love." A sense of unease washed over me. "You're triplets, so of course you developed at the same time." "It's more than that," she explained. "We realized if we switched roles, we could handle things better." "What do you mean?" I asked, growing more confused. "We all became each other at different times. Megan would become Margot, I would become Melissa, and we'd switch for a day or a week." I stared at them in disbelief. "You mean you've all been playing each other's roles for years?" All three sisters nodded. "Yes, Matt," one of them said. "We've all been with you, 1 week at a time." "That's when Rick started having problems," another added. "He found out we loved you and before he was okay with it, but once you came into the picture, he felt deceived." "He smirked at your ignorance," the third added. "Did he know before?" I asked, still trying to wrap my mind around everything. "Yes, before Megan and you started dating, we'd all met you. Switching became natural for us." "Why was Rick so upset then?" I asked. "Because we all fell in love with you, Matt," one of them said softly. "I still don't get it," I said, shaking my head. "I love Megan. What does this have to do with—" "Take Megan's hand," one of them said quietly. "Prove your love for her." I hesitated, realizing I didn't know who Megan was anymore. "Do you see? You can't. You don't know which one of us is Megan," one of them said, her voice laced with pain. "So why is Rick upset? Because he found out we love you." I couldn't fully grasp what they were saying. They exchanged strange looks. "Oh God, he doesn't get it," one of them muttered. "We should have seen this coming," another added. Then in unison they said, "Matt, we love you." Hearing them say it together was eerie. The truth finally hit me. All three of them loved me. "Oh damn," I muttered, overwhelmed by the realization. "Why? How?" I stammered. "This is wrong." I tried to gather my thoughts, trying to understand why they did this, both to me and to Rick. I was upset, but didn't know exactly why. The anger rose when I thought about Margot. "Margot dated other men while we were together," I said, my voice filled with bitterness. How long would I have shared my wife with other boyfriends if I hadn't figured this out? They looked guilty, and my question sparked an argument between them. "You didn't listen to me," one said sharply. "Margot had to keep dating for our cover." Another replied, "You two forced this on me. I didn't want it." "You liked it too," the third shot back. "We agreed Margot had to maintain appearances." "You should have kept Rick in line," one retorted. "Letting him know you loved Matt broke everything, and look where we are now." "You're just as guilty," another replied. "You spent every third week with him." "He's my husband," one of them shouted. "He's our husband," another retorted. "We've shared him this whole time, and we've been cautious. Margot barely dated anyone seriously after we fell for Matt." "I met him first," the middle one shouted. "He asked me out, and I fell in love first." "No, I loved him first," another shouted back. I had to stop the madness. "Enough," I said, my voice booming over theirs. "You're fighting over one guy when you've all been in this together from the start." One of them whispered, "But we really love you, Matt." "I love Megan," I said firmly. "She's my wife, but which one of you is she?" Every time the subject came up, I lost. I knew it, and so did they. To them, I had no other option but to give in. Yet I had a question I couldn't ignore. How many are a few men? I asked bitterly. 5, 10, 50? I knew deep down that the best solution would be to divorce. Then I could find a lonely, pretty woman with no sisters at all. Maybe that would fix everything. The looks I received were unexpected. All three of them appeared stunned, as if my words had hit them all at once, with full weight. "Matt, you don't mean that. Please, please tell me you don't mean that," one of them said, her voice trembling. The voice came from the one to my left, and for some reason her speaking gave me hope for my marriage. The other two sat in silence. "Megan," I addressed the one on my left directly. All three responded at once. "Yes. Damn it, I love Megan. I only love Megan. I care about Melissa and Margot, but I love only Megan." "Matthew, darling," one of them began, "if we don't tell you, you'll never know who's who. We've been doing this for years. You didn't notice before, and it wasn't an issue. We all love you. Why can't you just accept it and not change anything?" I shook my head. "Then we have bigger problems. For instance, while my legal wife was pretending to be Margot, she was cheating on me with other men, knowingly and senselessly." "I wouldn't say senselessly," one muttered. "It was to protect us." "How does deception mean protection?" I asked in disbelief. "How can you say lying doesn't matter?" "It was to protect our arrangement," she insisted, sounding defensive. "We had to maintain appearances. The compromises weren't what we liked, but we had no choice, and Margot wasn't that involved with other men, despite how it seemed. If Margot had stopped dating or Melissa had left Rick, you would have noticed right away. We knew you couldn't handle it." I was pretty sure the one in the center was Melissa. I believed Megan was on my left, meaning Margot was on my right. I couldn't prove it, but deep down, that's what I felt. "Do you realize how bad this is? Spending your lives swapping personalities. Can you even tell who's who?" I asked, almost exasperated. "You claim to love me, but you lied, cheated, and played games behind my back like it was some twisted joke." "Oh, we know who's who," one said confidently. "It's always been this way. We can keep ourselves separate in our minds, if that's your concern." "We're not that crazy," another added with a slight smile. I shook my head in disbelief. "Don't expect me to buy that. Everything I've learned today is insane. How do we move forward? Should I start dating other women now? Would that feel normal to you?" "You wouldn't be cheating on your wife," I said bitterly. "I already have 2 mistresses." Silence fell over the room. They were clearly processing everything I had said, and I had shocked them. None of them knew how to respond. "Our options," one finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "It's simple. You're married to Megan. Melissa and Margot have an online business, and so does Megan. We'll find jobs in another city, move, buy a house in a remote area. One of us will go into town daily for errands while the others run the business. You won't need company or love from anyone else. We'll take care of you, Matt. You'll have more love than you know what to do with." "Change jobs?" I interrupted, feeling their plans start to fall apart. "Yes, Matt. You'll love the new job. We'll all be together, living and loving happily ever after. We'll make it work," she continued, trying to sound convincing. Frustration rose within me. "I like my job. I like it right where I am. Living and loving together," I repeated sarcastically. "Well, we could think of something else, but it'll be much harder," Margot replied, determined. "Plus, Melissa and I have a growing business. Soon it'll be big enough for us all to retire on," another one added. I stared at them, trying to comprehend everything. Looking at all three, I realized something I should have known all along. I needed to differentiate them in my mind, to know who was who. Otherwise, none of this would ever work for me. One way or another, I should have known. "Megan, only Megan," I said quietly. "How do you feel about that?" Silence greeted my words. All three stared down at their hands, avoiding eye contact. I wanted so badly to understand how they could live this way, how they expected me to. But if they weren't willing to let go of that part of their lives, what was the point? I needed to know what Megan, the real Megan, thought before I could figure out what I thought. Suddenly, I felt a foot brush against my shin. At first, it was soft, rubbing up and down with a quiet intensity that said more than words could. "Megan?" I asked, speaking to all three of them, hoping one would respond. But still, silence. The rubbing became more forceful. I felt uncomfortable, like I was being pushed into making a decision I wasn't ready for. Then the one on my right started rubbing my other leg in the same way. Finally, the one in the center placed her foot between my legs. I need some space, I said, standing up abruptly. You're all asking me to completely change the way I was raised and what I've been taught. What you're suggesting is illegal in every state. I need time to think before I decide. I'm going to check into a motel for a few days. You all need to stay here, especially Margot. They didn't argue, but I saw the worry and fear in their faces. I packed for a few nights, and as I left, all three stood at the door, anxiously watching me. Please stay, one of them begged. You can sleep in the master bedroom and we'll take the others. Please don't leave like this. I need to be away from you all for a while. I'll come back with my decision, and you all better remain celibate. If I find out any of you have been with another man, that's it. One of them opened the door while the other two kissed my cheeks. The one at the door hugged me tightly and whispered, Matt, I love you. If you want, we can leave just the two of us, anywhere. I can't lose you. I just can't. I shook my head, feeling torn. You should have thought about that when we were dating and first married Megan, or whoever you really are. She glanced toward the living room through the open door, and I couldn't tell who she was looking at, but it was enough to confirm she wasn't my wife. You see, I continued, I can't trust any of you right now. None of you. You've made a mess bigger than I can handle. I didn't sign up for this. I married one woman, not all three. My raised voice made the other two rush to the door. All three were crying, pleading with me not to leave. As I got into the car, a strange feeling gripped my chest, like I was being suffocated from within. I drove off, unsure of what would come next. A few nights later, I saw Rick at a bar. When I approached him, he looked like he was about to leave. If you leave, I'll follow you, I said firmly, my voice tense. I'll follow you to hell, dragging a bucket of water. We're going to talk, and you're going to answer my questions. Just let it go, man. You win, Rick said, sounding tired. I'm leaving, and I'll never say a word about those three again. You knew all along and didn't tell me? I snapped. You don't understand, Rick said, taking a deep breath. When I met Melissa, I was the only man. When I found out what they were doing, I was furious. But eventually, I realized it worked in my favor. So what? I snapped angrily. You're married to one of them, and they're all using you. This is wrong on every level. Animals do this, one male for the whole herd. Rick shook his head. They started it, not me. When I found out, they convinced me I was lucky. Then you showed up. What do I have to do with this? I asked, my frustration growing. Matt, the fact is Melissa fell in love with you. Margot too. And Megan was crazy about you from your first date. I started to suspect something when my sex life began to taper off. Before long, I was getting about the same as a typical married guy, once or twice a week, maybe 3 times on a good week. But you were getting sex every night, several times a night, if I overheard them right. Are you telling me you knew what they were doing this whole time? Not just to you, but to me, and you went along with it? Look, they're beautiful women in case you haven't noticed, and they're identical triplets. If I told you, you wouldn't have believed me, and who knows what they would have done to stop me. How was I supposed to know? I asked, incredulous. They're unlike any other women you've ever met. I doubt they would have done anything to damage you or me, Rick said quietly. I thought I was married to one of them, not all three. I believed they loved me, I said, my voice breaking. Rick's voice softened as he continued. Then you showed up. I don't think I ever truly understood them. But you've won them over completely. 3 wives, 3 lovers, and now you're walking away from them. Rick's voice cracked, and I saw the hurt in his eyes. He couldn't finish his sentence. It hit me then. They had rejected him for me. They loved me more than they loved him, or at least that's how it seemed. I was torn, unsure of how to respond to Rick's pain or my own confusion. I finally understood why he had been so bitter toward me all this time. In his eyes, I had taken whatever emotional connection he had left with Melissa, Margot, and Megan. I'm sorry, Rick. I didn't know. I had no idea they were doing this. If you'd known earlier, Rick asked, would you have left them? I hesitated. Probably not. In the end, they would have swayed me to their way of thinking. Rick nodded. I realize now that what they felt for me was more like lust, or maybe it was just that. What they feel for you, Matt, is real love. I see it. They feel it. Why can't you? I had nothing to say. His argument made sense, painfully so. Rick sighed and finally said, "I'm leaving, unless you still want to knock me out." I just stood there, watching him disappear into the night. What could I say? As twisted as it was, his logic was flawless. I went back to the bar and drank late into the night, more than I had in a long time. By the time I stumbled back to my motel room, I was barely able to walk straight. I tried to think, to process my emotions, but nothing made sense. Of course, a drunk's mind never works as clearly as they think. The next morning, I woke up with a brutal hangover and even more confusion about my situation. The following 5 days were spent in isolation. I avoided everyone I knew. I went to work, then back to the motel, and spent my nights drinking and chatting with bartenders, hoping sleep would come easier. It rarely did. One evening, I made the call. After much thought, I knew it was time to talk. "Hello, it's Matt. We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've been thinking about everything this past week, and I hope you three have too." "Oh, Matt, please," one of the sisters, probably Megan, answered, her voice emotional. "Yes, we'll be here. I'll cook dinner, or we'll cook dinner. We really need to talk to you. We love you, Matt. I love you." Her words tumbled out, her thoughts disorganized. I could hear the tension and despair in her voice. This wasn't going to be easy. That's what we need to talk about, this love thing. I'm not happy with what you three did, but I also know I love one of you more than anything. I'm stuck in a mess I didn't create. I don't know if we can fix it, but we need to talk. "We'll have dinner ready. How about 6 tomorrow night?" she asked. "6 is fine. I'll be there at 6, I replied. I hung up before I could say more, almost in tears from hearing the desperation in her voice. I had no idea who I had just spoken to, and she sounded as upset as I was. This was going to be one of the hardest things I had ever done. At 6 the next evening, I parked, mustering the courage to enter what had once been my home. I felt like a stranger. It was surreal, because right outside that front door was the woman I loved, in 3 copies. The door opened quickly at my first knock. "Matt, we're glad you came," they said in unison. They were all there. If I didn't know them, it would have been terrifying. They were very nicely dressed, not exactly sexy, but very beautiful. I could see they had prepared carefully, and they all looked exactly the same. "I won't stand a chance, will I?" I asked, shaking my head. A look of confusion appeared on their faces. "What do you mean?" Megan asked. "Yeah, what do you mean by that, Matt?" Melissa followed. "We will give you every chance and hope you will do the same for us," Margot added. "We love you, Matt. Please, let us prove it to you." I sighed. "You're all dressed exactly the same. I can't tell you apart, and you know it." "Oh, we wanted everything to be equal," Megan explained. "Whatever happens tonight is important to you, and we know it. We thought that if we all looked the same, it would be easier for you to cope." "Or are you hiding behind the trick that I don't know which of you is which?" I said, feeling offended and angry. I had been attacked by a gang, and they clearly had no intention of giving up their way of life. Suddenly I was grabbed and dragged back inside. I heard the door slam and the lock click. "Okay, Matt," Megan said softly. "Then we'll do it your way." One of them began to undress, and the rest followed suit. Soon, all 3 sisters were naked. They lined up in front of me, then turned around, showing their backs. Red, black, and green marks, dots, bright and unmistakable, were placed between their shoulder blades. As if that weren't enough, next to each mark was a name, written in the same color. I pointed Megan, I pointed again, Margot, and then Melissa. "Wait a second," I said, frowning. "I thought the color green was mine." "We lied," Megan admitted, her voice soft. "We didn't know how upset you would be. The correct name is now highlighted in the correct color. If everything works out the way we hope, we'll always have our colors. On an unclothed body like this, or in our clothes, our colors will be the dividing factor." "You've exchanged everything before," I muttered. "How can I trust you to stand tall, and even more so, how can I be sure of that?" "These are not marks, Matt," Melissa said softly. "These are tattoos. We finished them on Monday morning after discussing it between us. They cannot be washed away, erased, or disappear. They are permanent. We knew you had to have some way of separating us from each other in your mind that would be permanent." I blinked, confused. "Names?" "No, only dots," Margot replied. "If you look closely, we each have a dot between our shoulder blades and another one on the front of our bodies, right next to our belly buttons. Do you see?" When I looked down at their bellies, I saw large flat flowers next to their belly buttons. In a way, it was sexy, but in another way, it was a reminder each flower was made with taste, and each had its own color. No, there was no black flower, only red, green, and blue. I knew I had to make a move. I thought to myself, maybe then let's go to the kitchen and talk. I felt like a space adventurer from the movies, taking a huge step into uncharted territory, unsure of the outcome. When we entered the kitchen, I grabbed Megan's hand and pulled her close to me. Sitting down, I held her tightly, much to her sister's dismay. "Why do you keep Megan close to you, Matt?" Melissa asked, her voice quivering. "She's my wife," I said firmly, "and I thought I was married to her all this time." "But we thought you were going to settle something between us," Margot said, her voice rising. "This is true," I nodded. "I'm going to force you three to become individuals. Or if you don't, I'm going to divorce Megan and move on. I know all three of you love me, and I know you all think this could work, but I'm not ready for this. I really, really don't know. I've always been a one-woman man, and all this confusion has really driven me crazy." "But what will Melissa and I do then, Matt?" Margot asked, her voice breaking. "We love you as much as Megan does. We deserve a chance with you too. We can share. From now on, we will only be with you. We can do whatever you want us to do to prove it to you." "I don't need your proof," I said coldly. "I want Megan. I tried to tell you last night, but you didn't listen. I love Megan. I want Megan. I love you too, but not as much as I love Megan." I saw the pain and hurt on the faces of Melissa and Margot. Megan held my hand tightly as my heart beat faster and faster. I'd been thinking about this for the past week, and I'd come to the conclusion that if we moved in together, we'd eventually be discovered. Legal and moral issues would be the next big thing on the evening news, just like that Mormon guy who's in trouble right now. "I cannot do it," I said, shaking my head. "We want you, Matt," Megan whispered, her voice trembling. "We all want you, and we will fight to keep you." "What about what I want?" I asked, my voice rising. "You all claim to love me so damn much. What about what I want and what I can handle? Don't you see that you're imposing your will on me without giving me a single chance?" They all looked at each other, guilt and sadness etched on their faces. They knew, deep down, that what they wanted wasn't what I wanted. And despite the fears in my own heart, I knew the only way to make things work was to have only one wife. "None of you seem to fully understand my feelings on this matter," I said, my voice steady. "I thought I was happily married to Megan all this time. I believed she was faithful and loved only me. Now I find out that she is really all of you. I discovered that she slept with other men while married to me. And although you all seem to think that what I didn't know wouldn't hurt me, it hurts more than a little." I felt Megan's grip on my arm loosen, and she began to pull away from me. I saw fear and perhaps pain in her eyes as I finished speaking. I had rarely cursed around any of them in the past, but the betrayal weighed heavily on me. I squeezed Megan's hand tighter, pulling her back toward me. "I need you three to know that I can only love one woman," I said, my voice calm but firm. "To do anything else for me is to cheat on the one I love, even if the other two agree with what we're doing. I don't. Can't you see that? If we tried to do what you want, I'd end up lost to all of you." "If you hadn't found out, everything would be fine," Melissa protested. "You've had each of us in turn since you got married. You never seemed to mind back then." "You're right about that," I conceded. "But on the other hand, there are marriages and relationships where the other partner doesn't know they're being cheated on either. As soon as they find out, it doesn't hurt any less, and it's never right." "But we all love you," Margot insisted. "We all want you to be our man." "Only Megan can have me," I said firmly. "Melissa and Margot, you need to find your soulmates, and I do mean men. Each of you needs your own man. Megan can have me if she wants, but that doesn't mean we'll work out after all this mess. I'm willing to try to make things right between us, but only if you can all be faithful to each other and to me." Tears started to form in all of their eyes. "This means," I continued, "that you, Melissa and Margot, need to find your own men. Stop trying this exchange trick again. Megan, you will have to be faithful to me and only me, just like I've always been faithful to you in my heart." There were sobs now, and I knew I had hurt them all deeply. I wasn't sure if Megan would stay with me after this. Perhaps their bond was too strong for them to accept that I would only be with Megan. However, I could only hope that it would be their choice, because the alternative would have caused us all even more pain. I'm ready to divorce Megan and move on with my life, no matter what they say or do, I thought to myself. I wasn't sure if Megan and I could make things right, but I still loved her, despite everything. She deserved at least one chance to be the good wife I believed she could be. I'm going to leave now, I said, standing up. You girls can let me know what you decide later. I need some more time alone, and you need to think things over. I drove back to the motel and sat in the dark for a while. I had been arguing with myself about this for days. It was a difficult decision, and I really hoped the three of them would accept the best offer I made. If they hadn't done what they did, my life would have been miserable for quite some time. I didn't want to divorce Megan, but I would have if they couldn't accept my terms. I had always been, and always would be, a one-woman man. Later that night, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Megan was standing in front of me. She looked haunted, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "Come in," I said softly. "Megan, how did you know it was me?" I asked. "Your color," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh, I forgot," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "What do you want to talk about?" "About us," she answered, her voice trembling. "Okay," I nodded, trying to calm myself. I hadn't expected her to show up tonight. In fact, I didn't expect any of them to show up at all. I had pretty much decided they wouldn't be able to break away from their regular lives, especially since they had been doing this since they were children. "Take a seat. Would you like something to drink? I have soda or bottled water." "Water would be nice," she said quietly. I brought her a bottle of water and sat down at the small table opposite her. She looked around the room, avoiding my eyes. Finally, I decided to break the silence. "Okay, Megan, you came here for some reason. This must be important if you've been digging around until you found where I went. What do you want to say?" "We talked about ourselves, all of us," she began. "Melissa and Margot are hurt deeper than you can imagine, but they both agreed that I deserve you, and if you take me back, I will be your wife and nothing more. Just your wife. No more swapping or switching, no more hiding the truth, and no more lying." I nodded. "Fine, but that's not all, is it?" "No," she admitted. "Melissa and Margot know we hurt you more than we ever realized. We never understood how you felt, as we all thought you would have died and gone to heaven if you knew you had all of us. Now we know we were terribly wrong, and we've probably ruined some of your love for us. I say we because until recently you were equally in love with all of us. Don't say you weren't, because you were. You treated each of us exactly the same. You still don't understand, do you?" I asked, shaking my head. "I treated you the same because, until recently, I thought I was dealing with my wife, the only person I loved with all my heart. I never knew, and if I had known, there would have been differences. Don't think there wouldn't be. In my mind, I don't love you all the same, even if you played different games with me and got away with it. In my mind, every time I got into bed with one of you, you were Megan." "I know that now," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "We know it now. We didn't see it then, but after today and the last few days, we know we were wrong. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Matt. I want to love you, and I want you to love me. Melissa and Margot wanted to too, but they realized they'll have to find their own men and make their own love." I sighed, relieved, and nodded. "So no more switching?" "Never again," Megan promised. "It won't be easy for us, but now we know we were wrong all along. This was a painful lesson for us, and we know Mom and Dad will be surprised to find out how bad we really were." "You don't have to tell them," I said quickly. "Let it go. The only ones who really know what's going on are you three, Rick and me. Let them have their ignorance. Let them think you're all good girls. I won't tell anyone, and I'm pretty sure Rick won't either." "Oh, we thought you might want us to tell everyone how we've changed," Megan said, her eyes wide with surprise. "Oh, hell no," I said, shaking my head. "First of all, it would put not only the three of you in an awkward position, but the whole family, and me too. Just forget about it, and we'll get on with our lives. Just the two of us. Melissa and Margot can find their own men, and pretty soon we can all be one big happy family again, without ruining everyone else's thoughts and feelings. It's up to you three and me to really figure this out. Let's not drag others into this mess, okay? Really? Megan asked, her voice trembling with relief. You'll be okay if only the four of us know what happened? My lips are sealed, Megan, I promised. This will be our secret. She jumped up and came over to hug and kiss me. I pulled my chair back and sat her on my lap, holding her tightly. I kissed her long and hard. Matt, do you think you could help me out a little here? She asked with a mischievous grin. It's been a long time since I've been with you. I mean, I don't want to pressure you or anything, but I'm completely on edge right now. I was on edge too, knowing that things were getting better despite what had happened. I gave in, letting her have a little fun. Later that night, after some strenuous exercise and lovemaking, Megan looked into my eyes with mischief dancing in her gaze. What? I asked, curious. I was just thinking, she began. You know Melissa and Margot will be looking for their own men now, right? Yes, I replied cautiously. Well, she said teasingly, in the meantime, they'll get really excited. I was wondering, do you think you could take care of them from time to time? You know, just until they find their own men to love? Megan, I exclaimed, shocked. You what? I'm kidding, she said, laughing. Just kidding. Can't you understand a joke? Crap, I muttered, shaking my head. I know you wouldn't do this on purpose, but I also better not do this out of ignorance in the future, if you know what I mean. You won't do it, she assured me. From now on, you're stuck with me. You understand, of course, that our sex life will probably slow down somewhat. I mean, you'll get tired of loving only me and all. Oh, I don't think I'll be the one to drift down, I replied with a grin. You won't get the break you once did, and you'll have to put up with me constantly pestering you for sex, I bet. Yes, she whispered. Oh yes, I can live with that. I hoped that everything would be fine with us. I really loved this woman. I never thought it would come to this when I first confronted Megan about the deception with her sisters. I still believed we could fix things. I wanted to believe that the woman I married, the woman I loved, was enough to move past the lies and betrayals. But the truth was far worse than I could have imagined. Megan wasn't just sharing me with her sisters. She was part of a lifelong game they played, one where I was the clueless pawn. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. How many nights had I spent with Margot or Melissa, thinking it was Megan? How many intimate moments did I share with someone who wasn't the woman I had promised my life to? The anger built inside me over time, growing stronger with each new revelation. Every time I looked at Megan, I saw the lie. I saw the manipulation, and it was more than just her. It was her entire family, all of them complicit in this twisted arrangement. I had been sharing my marriage with 3 women, none of whom were honest with me. Divorce was the only option. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't look at Megan without feeling disgusted. I had been tricked, used, and I knew I had to take control of my life again. So I filed for divorce, determined to get out of this tangled mess once and for all. The divorce process was brutal. Megan fought at every step of the way, claiming she still loved me and wanted to make things right. But how could I ever trust her again? She had allowed her sisters to sleep with me, to impersonate her, and had lied to my face for years. That wasn't love. That was betrayal in its purest form. In court, I was ruthless. I hired the best lawyer I could find and made sure every dirty detail came out. I wanted the world to know what Megan and her sisters had done to me. The looks on their faces when they realized how serious I was, when they saw that I wasn't going to let this go quietly, were the only satisfaction I got from the whole mess. I didn't just want a clean break. I wanted revenge. I wanted them to feel the pain they had caused me. So I went after the house, the cars, the savings. I knew it would hurt Megan more than anything to lose the life we had built together. And for once, I didn't care. I wanted her to feel what it was like to have everything taken away. It wasn't just about the material things. It was about her knowing that she had destroyed the one thing she claimed to value most, our marriage. And as much as it burned me, I knew I wasn't walking away from just one woman. I was walking away from a life of lies, from a family that had deceived me for years, and I made sure they all felt it. In the aftermath of the divorce, I didn't expect to find myself thinking about Melissa. Of all the sisters, she was the one who had hurt me the least. While Margot had been the wild one, always pushing boundaries and flirting even before the truth came out. Melissa had been quieter, more reserved. She never seemed to want this game as much as the others. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized she had always been different. Melissa and I began talking more in the months after the divorce. At first, it was awkward. I still associated her with the betrayal, and she was hesitant, knowing how much pain her involvement had caused. But there was something there, a connection I hadn't allowed myself to see before. As we talked, I realized that Melissa had never wanted this life of deception. She had been dragged into it by her sisters, trying to maintain the twisted bond they shared. One night, over drinks, Melissa broke down and told me everything. She confessed that she had loved me for years but never had the courage to speak up. She had gone along with the charade because she didn't want to lose her sisters or me. Her tears were genuine, and for the first time, I saw the person beneath the lies. Something shifted in me that night. I realized that while Megan and Margot had been playing games, Melissa had been suffering in silence. She was trapped, just like I had been, stuck in a situation she never wanted but didn't know how to escape from. And for the first time since the divorce, I felt something other than anger. I felt empathy. I felt hope. Our relationship developed slowly. I was cautious, not wanting to rush into anything after the mess with Megan. But the more time I spent with Melissa, the more I realized she was the sister I should have been with all along. She was kind, thoughtful, and most importantly, honest. There were no more games, no more secrets. What I saw with Melissa was what I got, and after years of deception, that was exactly what I needed. We fell in love in a way that was different from what I had with Megan. With Melissa, it wasn't about the whirlwind of passion or the rush of excitement. It was about trust, about building something real from the ashes of the lies we had both lived through. We started spending more time together, going on trips, sharing quiet moments that felt more meaningful than anything I had experienced in my marriage. Melissa had a depth to her that Megan never had. She wasn't interested in the superficial things Megan and Margot had always cared about. She wanted a real connection, something honest and lasting. And as I got to know her better, I realized I wanted the same thing. Eventually, I asked Melissa to marry me. It wasn't a grand gesture like my first proposal. It was quiet, personal, and filled with meaning. We had been through hell together, and I knew that if we could survive that, we could survive anything. Melissa said yes, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Marrying Melissa was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't just about finding love again. It was about finding peace. With Melissa, I didn't have to worry about who was lying to me or who was playing games. She was honest and true, and our life together was simple and happy, just like I had always wanted. Megan and Margot tried to reach out a few times after the wedding, but I kept my distance. I had no interest in revisiting that chapter of my life. Melissa had cut ties with them as well, realizing that the only way we could move forward was by leaving the past behind. We built a new life together, one based on trust and mutual respect, and it was everything I had ever wanted. Looking back, I realized that the revenge I sought after the divorce wasn't what gave me peace. It was finding love again, real love, with someone who valued me for who I was, not as part of some twisted game. Melissa and I moved on from the past, and together we built a future that was far brighter than anything I had ever imagined with Megan.
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode. Brother, I'm Jack, host of this podcast, and it's great having you here. If today's story hit home, send it on to a buddy who might need it. Remember, we're all in this together, turning life's curvy balls into wins. If you have an opinion or story to share, then drop a line in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep pushing forward. Stay strong, folks.